He was one of the richest men in China, a billionaire CEO feared and admired wherever he went. But one night, in a luxury African restaurant, his pride met the wrong person. A young waitress named Amara, poor but proud, working double shifts just to support her family. When she served him, Mr. Lee insulted her in front of everyone. He mocked her accent, her uniform, even her dignity. Laughter filled the room. Her face burned, but Amara stood her ground. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She simply looked him in the eye and said, "Respect is earned, sir, not bought." The room went silent. Seconds later, Mr. Lee clutched his chest, his glass fell, and the billionaire collapsed to the floor. Panic erupted. Guests froze. His bodyguards did nothing. And in that moment, the same waitress he insulted was the only one who rushed to his side. She called for help, pressed her hands to his chest, whispering, "Stay with me, don't give up." As he struggled to breathe, he grabbed her wrist and whispered something that would change her life forever. "Don't trust them." Before she could ask who, the ambulance arrived. They dragged him out, and the waitress was told to come along. Inside the ambulance, his words were broken, gasping. Betrayed, not an accident, none of them. At the hospital, Amara waited, confused, terrified, but unable to walk away. That's when two men in black suits approached her, their eyes cold. "You were the last person with Mr. Lee. You saw something you shouldn't have. Be careful what you say." In that moment, she realized, this wasn't just a heart attack. This was bigger. This was betrayal. And somehow she, a poor black waitress, was standing at the center of a storm that could topple giants. Because sometimes, dignity is more powerful than money. And sometimes, the smallest voice can shake the richest empire. This is how it all started. The restaurant lights shimmered like fireflies caught in crystal glass, their golden glow bouncing off polished marble floors. It was the kind of place where every chair was velvet, every plate was porcelain, and the air itself smelled like money. The guests that night were not ordinary diners. They were ministers, celebrities, and business tycoons. But among them, one man stood taller than the rest. Mr. Li Zheng, the Chinese billionaire CEO whose empire stretched across continents. His name alone could make politicians bow and rivals tremble. He arrived with an entourage, dressed in a dark tailored suit that cost more than most people's yearly salary. His gold watch caught the chandelier light, dazzling the eyes of those who dared look too long. Conversations dipped when he entered. People whispered. Some stared. But at the far corner of the hall, a young woman was fighting her own battles. Her name was Amara, 24 years old, with tired eyes that still held the glow of hope. She worked double shifts as a waitress, sending most of her earnings back home to her mother in the village. Tonight, her feet ached from hours of standing, her back throbbed, but her smile remained, a smile she had perfected to hide pain. As fate would have it, Amara was assigned to Mr. Lee's table. The moment she approached with the menu, she felt the weight of his gaze. His eyes scanned her not as a person, but as one might scan an object. She greeted politely, her voice steady. "Good evening, sir. Welcome. What would you like to start with?" Mr. Lee leaned back, smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. His tone dripped with arrogance. "You," he said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "look too poor to be serving me. Are you even trained? Do you know who I am?" The men at his table chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Amara froze, heat rushing to her cheeks. She gripped her notepad tighter, her smile faltering. "Sir," she said softly, fighting to steady her voice, "I am here to serve you with respect. Please let me know your order." But Mr. Lee wasn't done. He raised his voice, mocking her accent, twisting her words until the people around laughed. "Respect? Look at you, skin burnt from the sun, cheap shoes, hands shaking. You think respect comes from people like you?" The insult cut deeper than a knife. For a moment, Amara wanted to run, to disappear into the kitchen and cry. But something inside her, the dignity she carried from generations before her, the quiet strength her mother instilled, held her ground. She raised her head, eyes glistening not with tears, but with something fiercer. "Sir," she said, her voice firm this time, "you have your wealth, but I have my dignity. Please don't take that from me." The restaurant fell silent. Even the music from the grand piano seemed to hush. People stared, waiting for Mr. Lee's reaction. And it came, sharp and cruel. He slammed his palm on the table, making glasses tremble. "Do you dare speak back to me, a waitress in front of my associates?" His words were fire. "Know your place." His entourage shifted uncomfortably. They had seen Mr. Lee humiliate competitors, even government officials. But to lash out at a waitress, it unsettled them. Amara's heart pounded. She bowed her head slightly, not out of fear, but to keep herself from saying more. She turned to walk away, deciding silence was better than more insult. But before she could take 3 steps, something happened. Mr. Lee reached for his wine glass with a smirk, ready to toast his own power. But as the glass touched his lips, his hand trembled. His face twitched. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out strangled. And then, it happened. The billionaire CEO, the man who believed himself untouchable, collapsed to the floor with a thud that silenced the entire restaurant. Gasps filled the air, chairs scraped. The pianist froze mid-note. Amara turned, eyes wide. She saw him lying there, clutching his chest, his gold watch glinting under the light as if mocking him. For a few seconds, no one moved. His entourage stared, panic-stricken, but paralyzed. And in that moment, the tables truly turned. The man who had insulted her was now helpless. The billionaire who commanded respect was now at the mercy of the very people he looked down upon. The question that filled the room, and Amara's heart, was this: what had brought him down? And more importantly, why did it feel as though the night had only just begun? The room was frozen, as if time itself had paused to watch a billionaire fall. All that echoed was the soft clatter of a wine glass rolling across the floor, spilling deep red liquid that looked far too much like blood. Mr. Lee lay on his side, gasping, his chest rising and falling in frantic bursts. His face, once proud and composed, twisted in pain. The gold ring on his finger scraped against the marble as his hands clawed at the ground. No one moved. Not his bodyguards, not his wealthy guests, not the waiters hovering at the edges of the hall. Fear and confusion bound them like invisible chains. It was Amara who broke the silence. She rushed forward, her instincts louder than her fear. Kneeling beside him, she spoke urgently. "Sir, can you hear me? What's happening to you?" His eyes darted toward her. The arrogance that once lived there had vanished, replaced by raw desperation. He tried to speak, but only a weak gasp escaped his lips. "Help me!" The words were barely audible. "Somebody call an ambulance!" Amara shouted, her voice trembling yet firm. She looked around. Still, no one moved. The entourage exchanged anxious glances, but not one of them reached for a phone. It was as if saving him meant bearing a responsibility they weren't willing to carry. So Amara snatched her own phone from her apron pocket, fingers shaking as she dialed. Her voice cracked as she gave the emergency details. Within moments, whispers began to spread like wildfire through the restaurant. "Is he poisoned?" someone muttered. "No, maybe a heart attack," another replied. "I heard someone wanted him dead." Speculation grew. Eyes darted not only to Mr. Lee, but to Amara kneeling by his side. She felt their stares like daggers. In their silence, suspicion was already brewing. When she pressed a hand to his chest, she felt the erratic pounding of his heart. His breaths came shallow, desperate. She looked into his face. Sweat slicked his skin, and veins stood out along his temples. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't give up now." The ambulance siren wailed in the distance, but to Amara it felt like an eternity away. Then something happened that chilled her to her core. Mr. Lee grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, his eyes locked onto hers, wide, fearful, almost pleading. He whispered words no one else could hear. They want me gone. Don't trust them. And then, his grip loosened. His hand fell heavy to the ground. Amara's heart lurched. What did he mean? Who wanted him gone? She looked around, at his entourage, at the restless crowd, at the restaurant staff. Suddenly, every face seemed like a mask hiding secrets. Moments later, paramedics stormed in, lifting Mr. Lee onto a stretcher. They worked quickly, inserting tubes, checking vitals. His entourage finally came alive, rushing to follow, barking instructions in Mandarin and English. But before they wheeled him out, one of the paramedics glanced at Amara. You, come with us. He's not stable. He responded to you. Stay. Amara froze. Go with them? Into the world of this billionaire who had insulted her minutes ago? A world that smelled of danger and secrets? Yet something in her heart pushed her forward. She followed the stretcher, leaving behind the murmurs, the suspicious eyes, the spilled wine on the marble floor. The ride in the ambulance was chaos. Beeping machines, rushed commands, and the rattling sound of wheels against the road. Amara sat in the corner, gripping her hands tightly. She had never been this close to wealth, power, and death all at once. The billionaire's face was pale, his breath shallow, but he clung to life. And in between gasps, he muttered strange, fragmented words. Not accident, betrayed, trust. None of them. The paramedics shushed him, focusing on keeping him alive. But Amara heard it all. Every broken word landed heavy on her chest. Was this just the rambling of a dying man? Or a truth he desperately wanted someone to know? The hospital loomed tall and cold, its lights glaring against the night sky. Mr. Lee was rushed through sliding doors, doctors swarming him. Amara was left behind in the waiting hall, the scent of antiseptic biting her nose. Minutes turned into hours. She sat, staring at the floor, her mind spinning. Should she have walked away at the restaurant? Should she have let his own people handle it? What business did she have in the affairs of a man like him? And yet, deep down, she knew. The moment he whispered those words to her, her life had been tied to his. Don't trust them. Who was them? His business rivals, his entourage, or perhaps even the people sitting at the table with him tonight. Her thoughts were interrupted when two men in sharp black suits entered the hall. They scanned the room and walked directly to her. Miss Amara? One of them asked, his voice smooth but unnerving. Yes, she replied cautiously. You were the last person with Mr. Lee before he collapsed, the man said, his eyes narrowing slightly. We'll need you to answer some questions. The way he said it didn't feel like a request. Amara's heart pounded. Was she being treated as a witness or a suspect? The second man leaned closer, lowering his voice. Be careful what you say. Tonight, you saw something you shouldn't have. Her breath caught. What do you mean? But they didn't answer. Instead, they motioned for her to follow. As she stood, she glanced once more at the closed hospital doors behind which Mr. Lee was fighting for his life. And in her heart, she knew one thing. This was no longer just about a waitress and a billionaire. This was about secrets powerful enough to kill for. The room they led Amara into wasn't the typical hospital waiting area. It was cold, too clean, with walls that seemed to swallow sound. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, and two metal chairs sat opposite a table that looked more like it belonged in a police station than in a hospital. The men in black suits closed the door behind them. Their faces were unreadable, their posture too stiff, too controlled. Sit, one of them ordered. Amara obeyed, though her pulse raced. She had grown up learning to respect authority, but there was something about these men that felt wrong, as though their authority came not from the law, but from fear. The taller one leaned forward, resting both hands on the table. Tell us exactly what happened at the restaurant. Amara swallowed, gathering her thoughts. He insulted me. Then he took a sip of wine and suddenly he collapsed. That's all I know. The shorter man's eyes narrowed. You expect us to believe that? You were the one serving him, weren't you? The last person to touch his glass? Her stomach dropped. She remembered the whispers in the restaurant, the way eyes had darted toward her. Now the suspicion was no longer silent. It was spoken, sharp, pointed directly at her. I didn't poison him, she said quickly, her voice trembling. I swear it. I would never. Enough, the taller man snapped. Just remember, lies will not save you. Amara clenched her fists in her lap. Her whole life, she had fought to hold on to her dignity, even when people tried to strip it from her. Tonight, she would not let fear silence her. I am telling the truth, she said firmly, lifting her chin. If you think otherwise, then prove it. For a moment, silence hung between them. The two men exchanged glances, as though weighing whether she was brave or simply foolish. Finally, the shorter one spoke. Listen carefully, girl. Mr. Lee has many enemies. What happened tonight is bigger than you can imagine. If you value your life, you will forget everything you heard. Everything he told you. Amara's heart skipped. He had mentioned it. The whispered words. Don't trust them. She stared at the man, but his expression gave nothing away. Did they already know what Mr. Lee had said? Was this a warning? Or a threat? Before she could respond, the door swung open. A nurse stepped in, her expression urgent. Mr. Lee is awake. The men stood quickly, exchanging another look. Then, to Amara's surprise, the taller one said, Bring her with us. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the steady glow of machines. Mr. Lee lay propped up on pillows, tubes in his arms, his face pale but his eyes alert. For a man who had seemed moments from death, he looked startlingly aware now, watchful, calculating. When his gaze fell on Amara, a faint smile tugged at his lips. Not mocking this time, but grateful. You, he whispered hoarsely. You stayed. Amara hesitated by the door, unsure whether to step closer. The two men stood behind her, their presence heavy, as though monitoring every word. Mr. Lee motioned weakly with his hand. Come. She approached, standing by his bedside. His voice was low, strained but steady enough. They think I don't know, he said, glancing briefly at the men in black. But I do. Someone close. Betrayed me. Poisoned me. Amara's breath caught, so it wasn't just a random collapse. He had been poisoned. The taller man shifted uncomfortably. Sir, you should rest. But Mr. Lee cut him off, his tone sharper than his frail state suggested. Quiet. I will speak to her. Silence fell again. The machines beeped steadily. Mr. Lee turned back to Amara. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now carried something else. Fear. Desperation. And beneath it, a flicker of trust. I don't know why, he whispered, but I believe you. You have no reason to want me dead. That makes you the only one I can trust right now. Amara's chest tightened. A billionaire, a man with power and influence beyond her imagination, was putting his faith in her, a waitress who had barely enough to survive. But before she could respond, the door opened again. This time, 3 new figures entered, 2 police officers and a stern-looking inspector with tired eyes. The inspector scanned the room, then fixed his gaze on Amara. You're Amara, yes? The waitress from the restaurant? Yes, she said softly. You'll need to come with us for questioning. We have reason to believe you may have been involved in tonight's incident. Her knees weakened. What? No, I tried to help him. Mr. Lee raised a trembling hand, his voice sharp despite the strain. She saved me. She's not involved. But the inspector barely glanced at him. Sir, with respect, we have procedures. Until evidence proves otherwise, she remains a suspect. The officers moved closer, reaching for Amara. Panic surged through her chest. "No," she whispered. "Please, I didn't—" Mr. Lee coughed violently, his body shaking. With what little strength he had, he pointed at the men in suits who had been shadowing her all night. "Don't trust them," he rasped again, before collapsing back against his pillows. The room erupted in chaos, nurses rushing to stabilize him, officers shouting, the inspector barking orders. And in the midst of it all, Amara felt cold steel clasp around her wrists. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed louder than the beeping machines. As the officers led her out, her mind spun. Was this the trap Mr. Lee had warned her about? Was she being silenced before she could uncover the truth? The whispers followed her down the corridor. Maybe she poisoned him. She was the last one with his glass. Poor girl. She doesn't stand a chance. Her chest ached with fear, but beneath it, a fire burned. She thought of her mother back home, of the sacrifices she had made, of the dignity she had clung to in the face of humiliation. No, she would not let this break her. Somehow, some way, she would prove her innocence. And if Mr. Lee's words were true, she might be the only person left who could uncover who truly wanted him dead. As the police car doors slammed shut, Amara whispered to herself, a vow spoken into the night. "They want me silenced, but I will not be silent." The police station smelled of sweat, old papers, and stale coffee. The walls were peeling, the fluorescent bulbs flickered, and the air carried that heavy silence of a place where lives were decided with words and signatures. Amara sat at a wooden table in the interrogation room, her wrists sore from the cuffs that had only just been removed. Across from her sat Inspector Okoro, a broad-shouldered man with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through lies. He didn't speak right away. He simply studied her, his pen tapping slowly against a notepad. Finally, he leaned forward. "You were the last person seen with Mr. Lee before he collapsed. You handed him the glass. Why should I believe you had nothing to do with what happened?" Amara swallowed hard. "Because it's the truth. I served him the way I serve everyone else. I didn't poison him. I don't even know what was in the glass before it reached me." Okoro raised a brow. "So you're saying someone else tampered with it?" Her mind raced. She remembered the table, the entourage, the laughter, the way Mr. Lee had mocked her. But she also remembered his trembling words. "They want me gone. Don't trust them." "Yes," she said firmly. "Someone did. I don't know who, but it wasn't me." The inspector leaned back, folding his arms. "You understand how this looks, don't you? A billionaire collapses after insulting a waitress. The story practically writes itself. Revenge." Her heart sank. "No, I didn't—" "Calm yourself," Okoro cut in, his tone level. "I'm not saying you did it. I'm saying others will believe it. And once a story like that catches fire in the media—" He shook his head. "Even truth becomes ash." Amara lowered her gaze. For the first time that night, despair began to creep in. But then, something shifted. The inspector's voice softened just slightly. "Tell me, when he spoke to you before the ambulance, what did he say?" Her breath caught. Don't trust them. Should she repeat it? If she told the inspector, would she be painting a target on her back? She hesitated too long. He noticed. His eyes sharpened again. "He told you something, didn't he?" Amara finally whispered. "He said someone betrayed him, that he was poisoned, and not to trust the people around him." The inspector leaned forward, interest flickering in his gaze. "Did he name anyone?" "No." Okoro tapped his pen again, thinking. Then he stood. "Wait here." The door closed behind him, leaving Amara alone with her pounding thoughts. Hours dragged by. The buzzing light above her head felt louder than her own heartbeat. She replayed every detail in her mind, the spilled wine, his sudden collapse, his desperate eyes. Then, the door opened again. This time, a woman entered. She wore a dark suit, her hair neatly tied, her steps confident. She looked nothing like a police officer. She sat across from Amara, crossing her legs. "You must be Amara." "Yes," Amara said cautiously. The woman smiled faintly. "I am Adaze. I work with people who have an interest in Mr. Lee's safety." Amara frowned. "Government?" Adaze chuckled. "Something like that. Let's just say when powerful men fall, there are ripples. Some ripples drown nations." The cryptic words sent chills down Amara's spine. "What do you want from me?" Adaze's eyes sharpened. "The truth. Did Mr. Lee say anything else? Anything about who might be after him?" Amara hesitated again. She was tired of being cornered, tired of being treated like a pawn in a game she didn't understand. "Why should I tell you anything? Everyone keeps asking, but no one wants to protect me." For the first time, Adaze's smile faltered. "You're braver than I thought. But listen carefully. You're in more danger than you realize. Whoever tried to kill him, they won't hesitate to silence you too." The words pressed against Amara's chest like a heavy stone. "Then help me," she whispered. Adaze studied her for a long moment, then stood. "I'll see what I can do." She left as quietly as she came. By dawn, Amara was released. Inspector Okoro insisted there wasn't enough evidence to hold her, but the look in his eyes said something else. He wasn't letting her out of his sight. Stepping into the cool morning air, Amara wrapped her arms around herself. The city moved as though nothing had happened. Buses roared past, traders shouted in the market. Life continued. But for her, nothing would ever be the same. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A message from an unknown number. "They are watching you. Don't go home." Her blood ran cold. She spun around, scanning the street. Crowds bustled, cars honked, but suddenly every stranger's face looked suspicious. She deleted the message quickly, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Where could she go? Who could she trust? Before she could decide, a car pulled up beside her, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. The passenger window slid down. Inside sat Adaze. "Get in," she said simply. Amara hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to trust strangers. But hadn't Mr. Lee said the same? Don't trust them. Yet here she was, cornered by shadows she couldn't see. If she stayed, she'd be vulnerable. If she went, she might walk straight into a trap. She made her choice. Amara slid into the car. The door locked automatically. Adaze didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on the road as the car pulled away. "There are things you need to know," she said quietly. "About Mr. Lee, about why someone wants him dead, and about why you, Amara, are now part of this story whether you like it or not." Amara's throat tightened. "Me? I'm just a waitress." Adaze shook her head. "Not anymore. You're the only witness to what he said. That makes you dangerous. To them, and to us." The SUV sped down the highway, leaving behind the ordinary streets of the city. Amara pressed her palms to her knees, her body trembling. Her life had changed overnight. She was no longer just serving tables. She was caught in a storm of betrayal, power, and secrets that could shatter nations. And deep in her chest, a single question pounded louder than fear. Would she survive long enough to tell the truth? The black SUV sped along the highway, slicing through the early morning haze. Amara sat stiff in the back seat, her heart thudding with every turn of the wheels. She wanted to ask Adaze where they were going, but the woman's sharp profile and steady grip on the steering wheel made silence feel safer. Finally, Adaze spoke. "You're wondering why you're here?" "Yes," Amara admitted softly. "You were never supposed to hear Mr. Lee's last words," Adaze said, her voice low. "But now that you did, you're part of something far bigger than you think." Amara's hands trembled in her lap. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to work, send money home to my mother. I never wanted—" "Life doesn't ask what we want," Adaze cut in. "It drags us where destiny demands." The SUV turned off the highway, down a road lined with tall gates and security cameras. They pulled into a sprawling compound, white walls, manicured lawns, and guards posted at every corner. Inside, the air was cold, the silence heavier than at the police station. A daïse led Amara through a maze of hallways until they entered a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows. There, sitting in a wheelchair, was Mr. Lee. His face was still pale, his body weak, but his eyes burned with that same sharpness Amara had seen in the restaurant, the look of a man who was used to ruling empires. "You," he whispered when he saw her. "You came." Amara stood frozen. She didn't know whether to feel relief or fear. "Why am I here?" she asked cautiously. Mr. Lee raised a trembling hand. "Because you are the only one I can trust." Adaze moved to stand behind him, her expression unreadable. "She deserves to know the truth, sir." Lee nodded weakly. He motioned for Amara to sit. When she did, he began to speak, his voice ragged but steady enough to slice through the silence. "I built my empire with steel and sweat," he said, "but in the shadows I made enemies. Men who smiled at my table but sharpened knives behind my back." Amara's chest tightened. "You mean the people with you that night?" He nodded slowly. "One of them poisoned me, and I know who." Her heart thudded. "Who?" Lee's eyes flickered toward Adaze, then back to Amara. "But knowing is not enough. Proving it? That's where you come in." Amara blinked in shock. "Me? I can't." "Yes, you can," Lee cut her off, his voice firm despite his weakness. "They don't see you as a threat. They underestimate you. That makes you powerful." Adaze finally spoke. "He's right. We've traced the poison back to someone in his circle. But we need a witness who heard his words, someone with nothing to gain." Amara's throat tightened. She thought of her mother, of the tiny house waiting for her in the village. Was she really about to risk everything for a man who had humiliated her hours before collapsing? She stood, shaking her head. "I can't. I'm just a waitress. I don't belong in this world of billionaires and betrayal." Lee's gaze locked onto hers, piercing. "Dignity," he rasped. "That's what you said to me that night. That you have your dignity. Prove it now." The words struck deep. For years, Amara had fought for her dignity against poverty, against men who looked down on her, against life itself. And here was a chance, not just to prove her innocence, but to stand for something greater. She drew a shaky breath. "Tell me what to do." That night, a private meeting was arranged. Mr. Lee's closest associates gathered in a glass-walled boardroom, their expensive suits gleaming under the chandeliers. They thought it was a routine crisis discussion. None of them knew the trap waiting to be sprung. Amara stood outside the room, hidden behind tinted glass with Adaze by her side. A small recording device was clipped under her blouse. Her task was simple but terrifying. Confront the men and get one of them to slip. When she stepped into the room, every head turned. Whispers rippled. "The waitress? What is she doing here?" Amara's knees trembled, but she forced herself forward. She met their sneers with steady eyes. "I was there when Mr. Lee collapsed," she began, "and I know what happened." One of the men, a sharp-faced executive with slicked hair, scoffed. "What could you possibly know?" Her gaze didn't waver. "That he was poisoned, and that he told me not to trust the people closest to him." The room shifted. Uneasy glances exchanged. Sweat glistened on foreheads that had always been cool. Then, the sharp-faced executive sneered. Lies. Convenient lies from a poor girl who saw an opportunity to elevate herself. But his voice cracked at the edges, just enough to betray fear. Amara pounced. "Funny you should say that, because you were the only one who touched his glass before I served it." Gasps. Heads turned. The man shot up from his chair, his face pale. "She's setting me up!" But it was too late. Guards stepped forward, Adaze entered, and the recording device on Amara's blouse blinked red. The trap had worked. The executive was dragged out, shouting curses, his guilt exposed. When the dust settled, Mr. Lee rolled into the room in his wheelchair. His eyes fell on Amara, and for the first time, his proud face softened. "You saved my life," he said simply. Amara shook her head. "I only did what was right." He smiled faintly. "And that is worth more than all my billions." For a long moment, silence hung. A billionaire and a waitress, bound by fate, looking at each other not as rich and poor, but as two people who had seen death and chosen dignity. Then Mr. Lee added quietly, "Perhaps wealth blinded me. But tonight you reminded me, respect is not bought, it is earned." Amara's eyes glistened. She bowed her head, but this time not in submission, in gratitude. Days later, the story broke in headlines across the world. Chinese billionaire survives assassination attempt, saved by Nigerian waitress. Her name, once unknown, now carried weight, not for fame or fortune, but for courage. Back in her village, her mother wept tears of pride. The neighbors spoke her name with respect. And Amara, though her life would never be the same, held on to the one thing she had fought for all along, her dignity. Because in the end, it wasn't the billionaire who stood tallest that night. It was the waitress who refused to bow. And so, the mighty billionaire was brought low, not by wealth, but by betrayal. And the humble waitress? She stood taller than them all. But tell me, friends, was this destiny, or was it justice? One thing is certain, dignity cannot be bought, and in the end, it was her dignity that saved them both. Until next time, guard your heart, watch your circle, and remember, the smallest voice can change the fate of giants.